Sarah Mae Henderson was not like other young ladies in Cedar Creek, Montana. At 23 years old, she had already shocked the entire town more times than anyone could count. While other women her age spent their days sewing, cooking, and waiting for marriage proposals, Sarah Mae could be found racing horses across the open plains or fixing broken wagon wheels with her own two hands. The trouble started early for Sarah Mae. When she was just 16, she had climbed onto the roof of the schoolhouse to rescue a cat. The whole town watched as she crawled across the wooden shingles in her Sunday dress, completely ignoring the gasps and shouts from below. When she finally came down with the frightened cat in her arms, her mother fainted right there in the dirt. That was just the beginning. Sarah Mae had a way of finding trouble, or maybe trouble had a way of finding her. She spoke her mind when ladies were supposed to stay quiet. She rode horses when ladies were supposed to ride in carriages. She wore men's pants when she worked around her father's property, which made the church ladies whisper behind their fans. Her father, William Henderson, owned the only bank in Cedar Creek. He was a respected man who wore fine suits and kept his hair perfectly combed. But his daughter was his greatest challenge. Every morning when he woke up, he wondered what Sarah Mae would do that day to embarrass the family name. Her mother, Eleanor, had given up trying to turn Sarah Mae into a proper lady. She had bought corsets that Sarah Mae refused to wear. She had arranged tea parties that Sarah Mae would skip to go fishing. She had even hired a special teacher from back east to teach Sarah Mae how to walk and talk like a refined woman. The teacher lasted exactly 3 days before she packed her bags and left on the next stagecoach. The people of Cedar Creek had plenty to say about Sarah Mae Henderson. The women talked about her at their quilting circles and church meetings. They said she was wild and uncontrollable. They said no decent man would ever want to marry such a difficult woman. They said her poor parents must be so ashamed. The men in town had different opinions about Sarah Mae. Some of them admired her spirit, even if they would never admit it out loud. Others thought she needed a strong husband to set her straight. But most of them were simply afraid of her sharp tongue and quick temper. Sarah Mae had turned down 7 marriage proposals by the time she was 23. Each rejection had become town gossip for weeks. There was Timothy Walsh, the store owner's son, who brought her flowers every Sunday for 6 months. Sarah Mae told him she would rather marry his horse because it had more personality. There was Robert Mitchell, who owned 3 farms and promised to make her rich. Sarah Mae said she would rather be poor and free than rich and trapped. The most memorable rejection happened when Mayor Crawford's son, James, tried to force a kiss on Sarah Mae behind the church after Sunday service. Sarah Mae responded by punching him square in the nose. James Crawford walked around town with 2 black eyes for a month, and nobody dared to ask him what happened after that incident. The church ladies decided something had to be done about Sarah Mae Henderson. They organized a meeting and invited her mother to attend, Mrs. Crawford. The mayor's wife stood up and gave a long speech about proper behavior for young women. She said Sarah Mae was setting a terrible example for the other girls in town. Sarah Mae's mother listened politely to all the complaints. When the ladies finished talking, Eleanor Henderson stood up slowly. She looked around the room at all the disapproving faces. Then she said something that surprised everyone. "My daughter," Eleanor said in a clear voice, "has never told a lie, never stolen anything, never been cruel to a child or animal, and never failed to help someone in need. If that makes her too wild for this town, then maybe this town needs to think about what really matters." The church lady sat in shocked silence as Eleanor Henderson walked out of the meeting. From that day forward, Sarah Mae's mother stopped apologizing for her daughter's behavior, but the damage was already done. The people of Cedar Creek had made up their minds about Sarah Mae Henderson. They called her too wild to wed and said she would end up alone and bitter. They predicted that no man would ever be brave enough or foolish enough to try to tame her. Sarah Mae heard all the gossip, but she did not care. She had learned to ignore the whispers and pointed fingers. She spent her days doing exactly what she wanted to do. She rode her horse, Thunder, across the Montana plains until they were both exhausted and happy. She helped her father at the bank, keeping books and dealing with difficult customers. She read every book she could find, even the ones that people said were too complicated for women. On Sundays, Sarah May still went to church with her parents, but she sat in the back row and tried not to listen to the preacher's sermons about obedient wives and proper women. She looked out the window instead, watching the clouds move across the big Montana sky and dreaming of adventures beyond the small town. Sarah May had her own ideas about love and marriage. She did not want a husband who would try to change her or control her. She did not want to spend her life cooking and cleaning and having babies while some man made all the important decisions. She wanted a partner who would respect her mind and admire her strength. She wanted someone who would love her exactly as she was, wildness and all. The other young women in Cedar Creek thought Sarah May was crazy. They could not understand why she would reject perfectly good marriage proposals. They whispered that she was too proud and would regret her choices when she was old and alone, but Sarah May was not worried about being alone. She had thunder, her books, and her freedom. She had work that challenged her mind and wide-open spaces that fed her soul. She had parents who loved her despite all the trouble she caused. What more could a person need? As summer turned to fall, in 1886, Sarah May continued to live her life exactly as she pleased. She did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that a stranger was riding toward Cedar Creek who would see her wildness not as a flaw to be fixed, but as a treasure to be cherished. The people of Cedar Creek were wrong about many things, but they were especially wrong about Sarah May Henderson. She was not too wild to wed. She was just waiting for the right man to come along, a man who was wild enough to match her spirit and strong enough to love her without trying to tame her. The first sign that something different was coming to Cedar Creek happened on a Tuesday morning in late September. Old Pete, who sat outside the general store every day watching the road, saw a dust cloud in the distance. But this was not the usual dust cloud from a farm wagon or traveling preacher. This dust cloud was bigger and moving faster. As the cloud got closer, Pete could see horses. Not just one or two horses, but a whole string of them. Beautiful horses with shiny coats and proud heads. Leading them was a man on a black stallion that looked like it could outrun the wind itself. By the time the stranger reached the main street of Cedar Creek, half the town had come out to watch. The man sat tall in his saddle, wearing a hat that had seen many miles and boots that were made for serious riding. His clothes were dusty from travel, but they were good quality clothes. This was not a drifter or cowpoke looking for work. This was a man with money. The stranger rode slowly down the street, looking at the buildings and people with sharp blue eyes. His gaze took in everything: the bank, the general store, the church, the saloon. When he reached the livery stable, he stopped and climbed down from his horse. "Name's Jackson Whitmore," he told Ben Murphy, who owned the stable. "I need places for 12 horses and feed for at least a week." Ben Murphy had never seen horses like these. They were not the usual farm horses or cow ponies that came through Cedar Creek. These animals had bloodlines and breeding. They were worth more money than most people in town saw in a year. "You planning to sell these horses, mister?" Ben asked as he looked over the beautiful animals. Jackson Whitmore smiled, but he did not answer the question directly. "I might be staying in your town for a while," he said. "We'll see how things work out." Word about the mysterious stranger spread through Cedar Creek faster than a grass fire. By evening, everyone in town knew that a rich man with fine horses had arrived. The question started immediately. Where did he come from? What did he want? How long would he stay? Jackson Whitmore took a room at the Cedar Creek Hotel and ate his dinner in the dining room where everyone could see him. He was polite to Mrs. Patterson, who served his food, and he tipped her more money than she usually made in a week. But he did not talk much about himself or his business. The next morning, Jackson decided to explore the area around Cedar Creek. He saddled his black stallion, Storm, and rode out of town toward the hills. He wanted to see the land and get a feel for the territory. He had heard there were good opportunities for cattle ranching in Montana, and he was always looking for ways to expand his business. Jackson had built his fortune in Texas, starting with nothing but determination and a willingness to take risks. He had worked as a cowboy, saved every penny, and slowly bought land and cattle. Now he owned one of the biggest ranches in Texas, but he was ready for a new challenge. Montana Territory offered opportunities that Texas could no longer provide. As Jackson rode through the rolling hills outside Cedar Creek, he was impressed by what he saw. The grass was good, there was plenty of water, and the land stretched on forever under the big sky. This could be the perfect place to start a new ranch. He was so busy looking at the land that he almost missed seeing the rider coming toward him at full speed. But when he looked up, what he saw made him forget all about cattle and grass and business opportunities. A young woman was racing across the plains on a gray horse, riding like her life depended on it. Her long brown hair flew behind her like a banner, and she sat in the saddle with the confidence of someone who had been born on horseback. Jackson had seen many good riders in his life, but this woman was something special. As she got closer, Jackson could see that she was not just riding for pleasure. There was urgency in the way she leaned forward in the saddle and urged her horse to go faster. Something was wrong. Sarah May Henderson was indeed in a hurry. She had gotten word that old Mrs. Garcia, who lived alone in a cabin 5 miles from town, had fallen and hurt herself. Sarah May was riding to help, carrying medical supplies in her saddlebags. When Sarah May saw the stranger on the black horse, she slowed down just enough to be polite. But she did not stop. She had more important things to do than chat with some newcomer. "Morning," she called out as she rode past. Jackson touched his hat in greeting. But before he could say anything, Sarah May was already past him and riding hard toward the hills. He turned in his saddle to watch her go, amazed by her skill and speed. Jackson had met many women in his 30 years, but he had never seen anyone like the rider who had just passed him. Most ladies he knew rode side saddle and at a gentle pace, always worried about their appearance and reputation. This woman rode like a cowboy, and clearly did not care what anyone thought about it. Curious about where she was going in such a hurry, Jackson decided to follow at a distance. He told himself he was just exploring the area, but the truth was that he wanted to see more of this unusual woman. He followed Sarah May's trail to a small cabin tucked into a valley between 2 hills. By the time he arrived, Sarah May had already dismounted and gone inside. Jackson could hear voices coming from the cabin, Sarah May's clear voice and an older woman's weaker responses. Jackson waited outside, not wanting to intrude on private business. After about an hour, Sarah May came out of the cabin carrying a bucket. She walked to the well behind the house and started drawing water. This seemed like a good time to introduce himself. Jackson dismounted and approached carefully, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, miss," he said politely. "I'm Jackson Whitmore. I saw you riding and followed to make sure everything was all right." Sarah May looked up from the well and studied the stranger with intelligent brown eyes. She took in his expensive clothes, his well-bred horse, and his confident manner. Her first thought was that he was probably another man who thought he could charm her with smooth talk and fancy manners. "Mrs. Garcia fell and hurt her ankle," Sarah May said simply. "She be fine, but someone needs to stay with her tonight." "Is there anything I can do to help?" Jackson asked. Sarah May was surprised by the offer. Most men, especially well-dressed strangers, did not volunteer to help with nursing duties. She studied his face, looking for signs that he was just trying to impress her, but his blue eyes seemed sincere. "You could ride back to town and tell Doc Williams what happened," Sarah May said. "Tell him Mrs. Garcia's ankle is sprained, but not broken. He'll know what medicine to send." Jackson nodded and mounted his horse. "I'll be back with the doctor as soon as possible," he promised. As Jackson rode back toward Cedar Creek, he found himself thinking about the woman at the cabin. She had taken charge of the situation without hesitation. She had stayed calm under pressure and knew exactly what needed to be done. She was clearly someone who could handle whatever life threw at her. Jackson had always admired strength and competence, whether in horses, cattle, or people. This woman had both qualities in abundance. She also had something else that caught his attention. She had not tried to flirt with him or impress him. She had treated him like any other person who might be willing to help. By the time Jackson reached town with news for the doctor, he had made a decision. He was going to stay in Cedar Creek longer than he had originally planned. He wanted to learn more about this unusual woman who rode like the wind and took care of people in need. Jackson Whitmore had come to Montana looking for land and cattle opportunities. Instead, he had found something much more interesting. He had found Sarah May Henderson, though he did not yet know her name. And for the first time in his life, Jackson was more interested in a woman than he was in business. Jackson Whitmore learned the woman's name the next day when he returned to Mrs. Garcia's cabin with Dr. Williams. Sarah May Henderson was still there, helping the elderly woman with her daily tasks. When the doctor introduced them properly, Jackson noticed that Sarah May did not blush or giggle like most young women did when meeting a handsome stranger. She simply shook his hand with a firm grip and thanked him for bringing the doctor. Over the next few days, Jackson found reasons to stay in Cedar Creek. He told people he was looking at land for a possible ranch, which was true. But mostly he was hoping to see Sarah May again. He did not have to wait long. On Saturday morning, Jackson was having breakfast at the hotel when he heard a commotion outside. Through the window, he saw a crowd gathered in the street. In the center of the crowd was Sarah May, standing next to a beautiful but wild-looking horse that nobody else seemed willing to approach. Jackson paid for his breakfast quickly and went outside to see what was happening. The horse was clearly upset about something. Its eyes showed white with fear, and it was dancing nervously at the end of a rope. Several men were standing around giving advice, but none of them were brave enough to get close to the animal. That horse threw Jim Peterson right off and ran away. Someone in the crowd explained to Jackson. Been running wild for 3 days. Sarah May says she can calm it down, but I think she's gonna get herself hurt. Jackson watched as Sarah May approached the frightened horse slowly and carefully. She spoke in a soft voice that Jackson could not quite hear, but he could see the effect her words were having. The horse's ears started to turn toward her voice, and its dancing became less frantic. Sarah May continued to move closer, never making sudden movements or loud noises. When she was close enough, she reached out and touched the horse's neck. The animal trembled, but did not pull away. "Easy, boy," Sarah May said in a voice that was gentle but confident. "Nobody's going to hurt you. You're safe now." Jackson was impressed by Sarah May's skill with the horse, but he was also worried. The animal was still unpredictable, and one wrong move could result in serious injury. Without thinking about it, Jackson stepped forward. "Be careful," he said quietly. "That horse is scared and confused." Sarah May glanced at Jackson with surprise. Most men would have either tried to take over the situation or told her she should not be handling such a dangerous animal. Jackson had done neither. He had simply expressed concern for her safety. "I know," Sarah May replied. "But he just needs someone to show him kindness instead of force." Jackson nodded and stepped back, but he stayed close enough to help if needed. Sarah May continued working with the horse, and within half an hour, the animal was calm enough for her to lead it to the stable. As the crowd dispersed, Jackson approached Sarah May. "That was impressive," he said. "Where did you learn to handle horses like that?" Sarah May shrugged as if calming wild horses was something everyone could do. "My grandfather taught me when I was little. He always said that horses respond better to patience than to punishment." Jackson smiled. "Your grandfather was a wise man. I've seen grown men with years of experience who couldn't have done what you just did." For the first time since Jackson had met her, Sarah May looked genuinely pleased by a compliment. "Do you work with horses, Mr. Whitmore?" "I do," Jackson said. "I have a ranch in Texas. Cattle mostly, but I breed horses too." "I'd be interested in seeing how you train that one, if you wouldn't mind some company." Sarah May studied Jackson's face carefully. She had learned to be suspicious of men who showed sudden interest in her activities. Too many of them were just looking for excuses to spend time with her so they could eventually propose marriage. But there was something different about Jackson Whitmore. He seemed genuinely interested in her horse training skills, not just in her as a potential wife. and he clearly knew enough about horses to appreciate good horsemanship when he saw it. "I suppose that would be all right," Sarah May said finally. "I usually work with horses in the afternoon. You can watch if you want." "To learn something," Jackson grinned. "I might learn something, or I might be able to teach you a few things." "We'll see." Sarah May raised an eyebrow at his confident tone. "We'll see indeed, Mr. Whitmore." That afternoon, Jackson showed up at the stable where Sarah May was working with the horse from that morning. She had named him Rebel, which Jackson thought was fitting for both the horse and its trainer. Jackson watched as Sarah May worked patiently with Rebel, teaching him to accept a saddle and bridle without fear. Her methods were gentle but firm, and she never lost her temper even when the horse tested her patience. "You have good instincts," Jackson said after watching for a while. "But you might try approaching from his left side when you put the saddle on. Some horses feel more secure that way." Sarah May tried Jackson's suggestion and found that it did make Rebel more comfortable. "That's a good tip," she admitted. "How did you know that would work?" "Experience," Jackson said. "I've broken hundreds of horses over the years. Each one teaches you something new." As the days passed, Jackson and Sarah May fell into a routine of working with horses together in the afternoons. Sarah May discovered that Jackson really did know a great deal about horses and cattle. He shared his knowledge freely and listened carefully to her ideas. He never talked down to her or suggested that women should not be involved in such work. Jackson, meanwhile, was more impressed with Sarah May every day. She was not only skilled with animals, but she was also intelligent and quick to learn new techniques. She had strong opinions about everything from horse breeding to land management, and she was not afraid to disagree with him when she thought he was wrong. Their partnership attracted attention around Cedar Creek. People were not used to seeing a man and woman work together as equals, especially when the woman was Sarah May Henderson. The gossip started almost immediately. "That rich stranger is courting Sarah May," the church ladies whispered, "but he doesn't know what he's getting himself into." "She run him off just like she did all the others," predicted Mrs. Crawford. "Men don't like women who think they know everything." Sarah May's parents had mixed feelings about Jackson's attention to their daughter. William Henderson was impressed by Jackson's obvious wealth and business sense. A successful rancher would be a good match for Sarah May if she was willing to settle down. Eleanor Henderson was more concerned about her daughter's happiness than her financial security. She watched Jackson and Sarah May together and noticed something important. Jackson never tried to change Sarah May or criticize her unconventional behavior. He seemed to genuinely enjoy her company exactly as she was, after 2 weeks of working together. Jackson decided it was time to be more direct about his intentions. One evening, as they were finishing up at the stables, he asked Sarah May if she would like to go riding with him the next day. "Just riding?" Sarah May asked suspiciously. "Or is this one of those romantic picnics where you're planning to propose to me?" Jackson laughed at her blunt question. "Just riding," he promised. "I want to show you some land I'm thinking about buying. I'd like to get your opinion on whether it would be good for cattle." Sarah May was intrigued. No man had ever asked for her opinion on business matters before. "All right," she agreed, "but I choose the route, and we ride at my pace." "Deal," Jackson said immediately. The next morning, Sarah May led Jackson on a ride through some of the most beautiful country in Montana Territory. They covered 20 miles before stopping to rest the horses by a clear mountain stream. As they sat by the water sharing sandwiches that Sarah May had packed, Jackson told her more about his plans for a Montana ranch. He talked about breeding programs and grazing rotations and winter feed supplies. Sarah May listened carefully and asked smart questions that showed she understood the challenges of ranching. "You really know this business," Jackson said with admiration. "Have you ever thought about running your own ranch?" Sarah May laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Women don't own ranches, Mr. Whitmore. Women marry ranchers and cook their meals and bear their children. At least, that's what everyone keeps telling me." Jackson heard the frustration in her voice and understood it completely. "Maybe everyone is wrong," he said quietly. Sarah May looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? I mean, maybe there's more than one way to live a life, Jackson said. Maybe a woman could be a partner in a ranch instead of just a rancher's wife. Maybe two people could build something together instead of one person owning everything and the other person just helping. Sarah May stared at Jackson for a long moment. No man had ever suggested such a thing to her before. The idea was so revolutionary that she hardly knew how to respond. "That's a dangerous way of thinking, Mr. Whitmore," she said finally. "People around here don't like change." Jackson smiled and stood up to check on the horses. "Well, Miss Henderson," he said over his shoulder, "I've never been too worried about what people think." "Have you?" As they rode back to Cedar Creek that evening, Sarah May found herself thinking about Jackson's words. For the first time in her life, she had met a man who seemed to see her as a person with valuable ideas, rather than just a pretty face to be tamed and married. It was a dangerous thought indeed. By November, Jackson had been in Cedar Creek for 2 months. He had bought a large piece of land just outside town and was making plans to build a ranch house and barn. He had also been spending most of his free time with Sarah May, much to the fascination and disapproval of the local residents. The relationship between Jackson and Sarah May was unlike any courtship the people of Cedar Creek had ever seen. Instead of formal visits in the parlor with her parents watching, Sarah May and Jackson worked together training horses and discussing ranch business. Instead of flowers and poetry, Jackson brought Sarah May books about cattle breeding and new farming techniques. Instead of trying to impress her with fancy dinners and expensive gifts, he treated her like an equal partner in all his plans. Sarah May had never been happier in her life. For the first time, she had found someone who understood and appreciated her unconventional nature. Jackson never criticized her for wearing men's pants or speaking her mind. He never suggested that she should be more ladylike or submissive. Instead, he seemed to admire her strength and independence, but their happiness was about to be tested in ways neither of them expected. The first challenge came with the early winter weather. November in Montana Territory could be brutal, and this year was no exception. A blizzard hit the area in late November, bringing 3 feet of snow and temperatures so cold that water froze in the wells. Jackson's new cattle herd was not prepared for such severe weather. He had planned to build proper shelter before winter, but the blizzard came weeks earlier than expected. Within days, Jackson realized he was in serious trouble. His cattle were dying, and he was facing financial ruin. Most of the people in Cedar Creek expected Sarah May to distance herself from Jackson now that his fortune was in danger. After all, what woman would want to marry a man who might lose everything? But Sarah May surprised everyone by doing exactly the opposite. When she learned about Jackson's problems, Sarah May immediately took action. She organized the women in town to provide hot meals for the ranch hands who were working around the clock to save the cattle. She used her connections at her father's bank to arrange emergency credit for Jackson to buy hay and feed. She even rode out to the ranch herself in the middle of the storm to help with the rescue efforts. "You don't have to do this," Jackson told her as they worked together to dig cattle out of snowdrifts. "This is my problem, not yours." Sarah May looked at him with determination in her brown eyes. "Your problems are my problems," she said simply. "That's what partners do for each other." Jackson felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. This remarkable woman was willing to stand by him even when things looked hopeless. She was not interested in his money or his success. She cared about him as a person. Thanks to Sarah May's help and the hard work of everyone involved, Jackson managed to save most of his cattle herd. The financial losses were serious but not fatal to his business. As the storm cleared and warmer weather returned, Jackson began to believe that he and Sarah May could overcome any challenge together. But their second test was much more serious than bad weather. In December, a stranger arrived in Cedar Creek asking questions about Jackson Whitmore. The man's name was Robert Kane, and he claimed to be a former business partner of Jackson's from Texas. Kane told anyone who would listen that Jackson had cheated him out of valuable land and stolen money from their joint business ventures. Kane was a smooth talker with expensive clothes and official-looking documents. He said he had come to Montana to get justice and to warn the good people of Cedar Creek about Jackson's true character. He claimed that Jackson was a liar, a cheat, and a thief who could not be trusted. The accusations spread through Cedar Creek like wildfire. People who had been impressed by Jackson's wealth and success suddenly began to doubt everything they thought they knew about him. Some of the business deals Jackson had been negotiating fell through as potential partners decided they could not risk working with someone whose reputation was in question. Sarah May was shocked by the accusations, but not because she believed them. She was shocked because she could see how much they were hurting Jackson. The confident, successful man she had fallen in love with suddenly seemed older and more tired. The joy had gone out of his blue eyes, and she could see that he was struggling with anger and frustration. "These accusations are not true," Jackson told Sarah May one evening as they sat by the fire in her parents' parlor. "Kane is lying about everything, but I can't prove it, and people are starting to believe him." Sarah May reached over and took Jackson's hand in hers. "I don't need proof," she said firmly. "I know what kind of man you are. You're honest and hardworking and kind. No lies from a stranger can change that." Jackson squeezed her hand gratefully, but he could see the worry in her eyes. "Your reputation is going to suffer if you stay connected to me," he said. "People are already talking about how you've been fooled by a criminal." Sarah May's eyes flashed with anger. "Let them talk," she said. "I've never cared what the gossips in this town think about me, and I'm not going to start now." But the pressure on Sarah May was real and intense. Her father came to her with concerns about Jackson's character. The church ladies made pointed comments about young women who were too trusting of smooth-talking strangers. Even some of Sarah May's few female friends suggested that she should be more careful about her association with Jackson. The worst moment came when Kane himself approached Sarah May outside the general store one afternoon. He was a handsome man, with silver hair and a charming smile, but Sarah May could sense something cold and calculating behind his friendly manner. "Miss Henderson," Kane said, tipping his hat politely, "I hope you'll forgive my boldness in speaking to you, but I feel I must warn you about Mr. Whitmore. He has a history of taking advantage of trusting people, especially women. I would hate to see such a lovely young lady become his next victim." Sarah May looked Kane straight in the eye and spoke in a voice that was calm but cold as winter wind. "Mr. Kane, I don't know what your business is with Mr. Whitmore, but I suggest you conduct it with him directly. I am not interested in your opinions or your warnings." Kane's friendly mask slipped slightly, and Sarah May caught a glimpse of anger in his eyes. "You'll regret defending him," Kane said quietly. "When the truth comes out, you'll be sorry you ever met Jackson Whitmore." Sarah May smiled sweetly. "The only thing I regret, Mr. Kane, is wasting my time talking to you." She walked away without another word, leaving Kane standing alone on the sidewalk that evening. Sarah May told Jackson about her conversation with Kane. Jackson's face grew dark with anger when he heard how Kane had approached her. "He has no right to involve you in this," Jackson said. "This is between him and me. Maybe," Sarah May said thoughtfully. "But I think Mr. Kane made a mistake today. He was too eager to turn me against you. That makes me think he's more desperate than he wants people to believe." Sarah May's instincts proved to be correct. Over the next few days, she began asking careful questions around town about Kane's story. She visited Mrs. Garcia, who had friends and relatives in Texas. She wrote letters to business contacts her father had in other towns. She even convinced Ben Murphy at the livery stable to let her examine Kane's horse and saddlebags when Kane was not around. What Sarah May discovered changed everything. Kane's story about being Jackson's business partner had several holes in it. The dates he gave for their supposed partnership did not match with other facts. The documents he carried looked official, but they had inconsistencies that suggested they were forgeries. Most importantly, Sarah May learned that Kane had been asking questions about Jackson's wealth and property holdings. It seemed that Kane was more interested in Jackson's current assets than in getting justice for past wrongs. "Sarah," May shared her discoveries with Jackson, and together they began to piece together the truth. Kane was not a former business partner seeking justice. He was a con man who had heard about Jackson's success and had come to Montana, hoping to blackmail or steal from him. Armed with this information, Jackson and Sarah May set a trap for Kane. They arranged for the sheriff to be hidden nearby when Jackson met with Kane to discuss his accusations. During that meeting, Kane revealed his true intentions when he offered to drop his accusations in exchange for a large cash payment. The sheriff arrested Kane for attempted blackmail and fraud. When Kane's belongings were searched, they found forged documents and evidence that he had attempted similar schemes in other towns. As Kane was led away in handcuffs, Jackson felt a weight lift from his shoulders. His reputation was cleared and his business prospects improved immediately. But more importantly, he had learned something valuable about the woman he loved. Sarah May had stood by him when things looked hopeless. She had defended him when others doubted. She had worked tirelessly to uncover the truth and clear his name. She had proven that her love was not dependent on his wealth or success, but on the man he truly was. That evening, as they walked together, under the winter stars, Jackson took Sarah May's hand and stopped walking. "Sarah May," he said seriously, "I need to ask you something important." Sarah May felt her heart start to beat faster. She had been expecting this moment for weeks. The engagement of Sarah May Henderson and Jackson Whitmore caused quite a stir in Cedar Creek. Some people were shocked that the untamable Sarah May had finally agreed to marry someone. Others were surprised that the wealthy rancher had chosen such an unconventional woman when he could have had his pick of proper ladies from anywhere in the territory. But Sarah May and Jackson did not care what other people thought. They were too busy planning their future together. Unlike most engaged couples who spent their time discussing flowers and wedding dress details, Sarah May and Jackson spent hours talking about cattle breeds, land management, and business plans. Sarah May had one firm requirement for their wedding. She did not want a traditional church ceremony with all the usual fuss and formality. She wanted something that reflected who they really were as people. "I've been thinking," Sarah May told Jackson one afternoon as they rode across the land that would soon be their ranch. "Instead of getting married in the church with everyone staring at us, what if we had the ceremony right here on our own land?" Jackson smiled at the suggestion. It was so perfectly like Sarah May to want something different and meaningful instead of something conventional. "Where exactly were you thinking?" Sarah May pointed to a high mesa that overlooked their entire property. From up there they could see for miles in every direction, rolling hills, meandering streams, and endless sky. "Up there," she said. At sunrise, when everything is peaceful and beautiful, Jackson loved the idea immediately. "An outdoor wedding at sunrise," he said. "I think that's perfect. But what will your parents think? And what about the preacher?" Sarah May grinned. "My parents will think it's exactly the kind of thing their wild daughter would do. And Preacher Wilson already told me he'd marry us anywhere we wanted, as long as it's legal and proper." They set the date for the first Saturday in June, 1887. Word of their unusual wedding plans spread through Cedar Creek and the surrounding area. Some people thought it was romantic and original. Others thought it was just another example of Sarah May Henderson's refusal to do anything the normal way. Sarah May's mother, Eleanor, was surprisingly supportive of the outdoor wedding idea. "If you're going to be different," she told her daughter, "you might as well be different in a beautiful way." The wedding preparations were unlike anything Cedar Creek had ever seen. Instead of ordering fancy decorations from back east, Sarah May and Jackson decided to use the natural beauty of the Montana landscape. Instead of hiring an expensive caterer, the women of the town volunteered to bring dishes for a community feast. Sarah May's wedding dress was also unconventional. She chose a beautiful white gown with a full skirt and delicate lace sleeves, but she had it made shorter than traditional wedding dresses so she could wear her favorite riding boots underneath. She planned to wear her hair loose and flowing, instead of pinned up in an elaborate style. "You're going to look beautiful," Eleanor Henderson told her daughter as they worked on the final dress fittings. "But more importantly, you're going to look like yourself." As the wedding day approached, Jackson found himself both excited and nervous. He had never imagined that he would find a woman who understood him so completely. Sarah May was not just beautiful and strong, she was also his intellectual equal and his perfect partner in every way that mattered. 3 days before the wedding, Jackson's friends and business partners from Texas arrived in Cedar Creek. They had come to meet Sarah May and to celebrate Jackson's marriage. Jackson was eager for them to meet his bride, but he was also a little worried about what they would think of her unconventional ways. He need not have worried. Sarah May charmed Jackson's friends immediately, not by being demure and ladylike, but by being exactly herself. She talked knowledgeably about cattle breeding with the ranchers, discussed business strategies with the bankers, and even arm-wrestled with Jackson's foreman and won. "Jackson," his old friend Pete Morrison said, "privately, I've never seen you happier than you are with that woman. She's perfect for you." The night before the wedding, Sarah May could not sleep. She was not nervous about marrying Jackson. She was absolutely certain that he was the right man for her. But she was thinking about how much her life was about. To change, she walked out onto the porch of her parents' house and looked up at the stars. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Jackson Whitmore. She would leave her childhood home and start a new life as a rancher's wife. But more than that, she would be a partner in building something completely new. Having second thoughts? A familiar voice asked behind her. Sarah May turned to see her father standing in the doorway. William Henderson had been worried about his daughter's unconventional choice, but over the past few months he had come to respect and like Jackson. "No second thoughts," Sarah May said with a smile. "Just thinking about how different my life is going to be." Her father came to stand beside her on the porch. "Different can be good," he said quietly. "Your mother and I have always known that. You were meant for something special. Maybe this is it." "Maybe it is," Sarah May agreed. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful. As the sun began to rise over the Montana hills, people started gathering on the mesa that Sarah May and Jackson had chosen for their ceremony. It was a small group, family, close friends, and a few neighbors who had become genuinely fond of the unusual couple. Sarah May arrived on horseback, wearing her beautiful white dress and riding side saddle for once in deference to the formal occasion. But her riding boots peeked out from under her skirt, and her hair flowed free down her back. She looked like a fairy tale princess who had decided to be practical. Jackson was waiting for her at the top of the mesa, wearing his best suit and standing beside Preacher Wilson. When he saw Sarah May riding toward him with the sunrise behind her, Jackson felt his breath catch in his throat. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Sarah May dismounted and walked to stand beside Jackson. They faced each other with the preacher between them, and their friends and family gathered around. In the distance, the land they would share stretched out under the enormous Montana sky. Preacher Wilson began the ceremony with words about love and commitment and partnership. He talked about how marriage was not just about two people promising to love each other, but about two people promising to build a life together based on mutual respect and shared dreams. When it came time for the vows, Sarah May and Jackson had written their own promises to each other. "Jackson," Sarah May said, her voice clear and strong, "I promise to be your partner in all things. I promise to work beside you to build our ranch and our life together. I promise to love you for who you are, not for who I might want you to become. And I promise that our life together will be an adventure worth living." Jackson's voice was deep with emotion as he spoke his vows. "Sarah May, I promise to respect your strength and your independence. I promise to value your opinions and to make all our important decisions together. I promise to love your wild spirit and never try to tame it. And I promise that whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together." When Preacher Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson and Sarah May kissed as the sun rose fully over their land. The small crowd cheered and threw handfuls of wildflower petals that Sarah May's friends had gathered the day before. After the ceremony, everyone rode back to the ranch for a celebration feast. Tables had been set up under the cottonwood trees near the creek, and the women of Cedar Creek had outdone themselves preparing food. There was roasted beef and fresh bread, vegetables from local gardens, and pies made with wild berries. As the day wore on, people told stories and made speeches wishing the new couple well. Some of the older folks admitted that they had been wrong about Sarah May being too wild to wed. They said that Jackson and Sarah May seemed perfect for each other, and they predicted that the couple would build something wonderful together. Late in the afternoon, when most of the guests had gone home, Sarah May and Jackson found themselves alone on the porch of their new ranch house. They sat together watching the sun set over their land, still dressed in their wedding clothes but completely relaxed and happy. "So," Jackson said with a smile, "how does it feel to be a married woman?" Sarah May considered the question seriously. "It feels exactly right," she said finally. "I thought getting married would make me feel trapped or different, but I just feel like myself. Only now I have someone to share everything with." Jackson took her hand and looked at the simple gold ring on her finger. "I love you, Mrs. Whitmore," he said softly. "I love you too, Mr. Whitmore," Sarah May replied. As the years passed, Sarah May and Jackson proved that two strong-willed, independent people could build a successful marriage and business together. Their ranch became one of the most prosperous in Montana Territory. They raised prize-winning cattle and horses, and they were known throughout the region for their innovative ranching methods. They also raised 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters, who inherited their parents' independent spirits and strong characters. Sarah May insisted that all their children, both boys and girls, learn to ride and rope and manage cattle. She wanted them to be capable and self-reliant regardless of whether they were male or female. The people of Cedar Creek eventually stopped calling Sarah May too wild to wed, and